Okay, this is part two. I don't like the videos to be more than 20 minutes long in case it stops recording it. Sometimes you press stop and then the video just crashes and you've lost the whole video. So I don't want to make it too long for that reason. But yeah, I watched Deadpool the other day, yesterday. It's terrible, terrible, terrible film. And I think filmmakers are getting very shit right now. Is it because the best ones are not making films, or is it because they're running out of ideas? I don't know, but the whole multi-universe thing just isn't working. I don't understand the whole multi-universe, and I think the subconscious reason for why people are talking about the multi-universe is because they're trying to give people something more impressive than what I'm going to give them. I'm going to tell them that, I can make timelines, but no, I can't jump from timeline to timeline. That's not possible. And so by creating some sort of world where you can jump from timeline to timeline, they're kind of making my belief sound more boring and less interesting. But the idea that you can just go into different timelines and pick out, I don't know. I mean, I really don't think there's truth to it. I feel like it's too complicated that not even I could figure that out. Like, if you have loads of Deadpools all on different timelines and then you bring them into a specific timeline, then how are they going to go back into that? It's That's not how it is. You have one timeline, you focus on that timeline, and you can't move on to the next timeline until you've finished that timeline, until that timeline's finished. And once that timeline's finished, then you can't just take them out of that one because the soul has moved on. And it's, timelines are about raising souls up. And if you take a soul out of a timeline before the timeline's finished, then you haven't raised the timeline. You haven't raised that person up. You can make a copy of what they're like, I guess, but it's not them. And if it's not them, then you can't do that. The idea that you can just jump out of a timeline and go live in someone else's timeline and then jump back in, you can't do that, because how is the soul going to progress to its full potential if it's just jumped out somewhere and then jumped in? Because you would have changed the timeline, because the whole point of living is to learn and to evolve. Even if you remember, even if you forget all your past, what you've just done. So you say if you jumped out of a timeline and spent 20 years living in a different timeline and jumped back in, um, you'd be changed. Your soul would be changed, and if your soul would be changed, then when you jump back into the timeline, your actions and your everything about you will be changed. Hence, the timeline will change, and you can't just do that with random souls. Just randomly pick them up, take them somewhere else, bring them back in, and then get them to finish off the regular timeline. You can't do that, because then the regular timeline changes, and you just can't do it because it's too complicated, and you can't change the timeline. You have to all grow them all up together. It's like a plant. You can't just stop a plant halfway, midway, chop it off, and go and sew it onto something else, and then chop it back off, and then come bring it back to the original flower, and expect it to grow in the same way that it would have done if it hadn't have done that. It'd be damaged, it'd be broken if you did that. So yeah, I don't like this. I don't like the idea of this multi-universe world that Marvel are creating, because it feels like they're just trying to create something that's far more impressive than the truth, and people are not going to be so impressed with my truth. Yeah, I can make timelines, but you can't leave them. You have to start them, make them grow, raise up the souls in them, and then let them all leave. Maybe they can leave one by one, but they can't come back in. It's like dying. Once you're dead, your body's dead. You can't just come back into your body. I know people have near death experiences, but that's near death experience. That's not death experiences. There's a difference between near death experiences and death experience. But yeah, and so if I start saying that if you've left a timeline, you can't come back into it, I don't think they'd be that impressed with it if they're going to start believing in a world, a multi-universe. And you're confusing people as well. There's a lot of people that are starting to say things like, oh yeah, I came from this timeline, and then after I die, I could choose to become an Egyptian. I'm going to go back time, and I'm going to live a life as an Egyptian. No, that's all. If you're all thinking like that, imagine 8 million people that just pick and choose which life they want to live in. Oh, I want to live in. I think Marvel is fucking up people's minds with this idea of multi-universes, because there's some people that generally believe. I've seen on this what my spy is doing, Alex. he's spoken to some people that are believing that they could just die and then live a life as an Egyptian, and I just think, why would you think that? Why would you think people 2,000 years ago are smarter than what they are now? You know, I mean, technically there would have been some people that have had 10 lives 1,000 years ago, and then their soul has been put on pause until now. I think that's what happened to Eminem. But so technically, if you're on your fourth life, then there probably was people that were smarter than you 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. But Egyptians, that's like 5,000 years ago. If you think there was people smarter than you 5,000 years ago, the only way that could happen is if you're living your first or second life, because maybe there were people living their third life 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And if people were living your third life 4,000 years ago and you're living your first life now, they are smarter than you, but technically that's only because you're stupid. That's not because you're smart. And also they didn't have good education at all, and therefore, if you do generally believe that people 3,000 years ago are smarter than you, um, I think that you must be just not see the truth, because they thought the world was flat back then. Do you think the world was flat? Um, but yeah, that's just, I thought I'd say that I didn't like the film at all because it was just random killing madness, and but yeah, maybe that's the point of it, to try and just get people to believe in a world that's so much better than the truth, so that when the truth comes out, they're disappointed by the truth. Um, but yeah, technically, I thought films were a lot better 5, 6 years ago. And what else do I want to say? I don't know. I might be going back. What else did I talk about? Yeah. So the negative name with N-Sinc is also something I want to talk about, because I feel like I haven't actually figured that one out. Like, I don't really. I get Angels of, well, the name is N-Sinc, so Angels in Sync kind of does make, so you can have Angels in Sync or Angels out of sync, because their songs seem to all be contradicting each other. So I don't know. You could either go with the, if you are going to choose a name for them, angels of, angels who are in sync, angels who are out of sync. That would be one of the options. Um, or angels of, I guess you could have angels of Justin Timberlake, but I feel like they wouldn't want that. So that's why I was thinking maybe you should have angels who pretend to like God the Father, because that's how they're doing. But at the same time, that's not really what their songs are about. So yeah, I'm struggling to come up with a negative name for them. So I guess they could choose whichever one they want. And the positive name, I don't know. I do like Angels with Contradicting Messages, because all their songs do seem to, like, one minute they're saying goodbye, the next minute they're saying they'll never leave you, there's all these. But yeah, it's for all the different songs rather than each song does not show both. But yeah, I just thought I'd say all of that.